They were bound by grief, drawn together in a time of loss. But their forbidden love spiraled into a nightmare, one that ended in bloodshed. Loss has a way of breaking people, of twisting emotions until lines blur between comfort and desire, between love and something far more dangerous. When Shaniqua Nick Batson buried her husband, Jamal, she was left to navigate a world without him, raising their children alone in the city of Houston. But she wasn't entirely alone. Jamal's younger brother, Rashad, stepped in, offering support, offering comfort. And in the depths of their shared grief, something unexpected happened. What should have been a shoulder to lean on became an entanglement neither could escape. How does grief turn into passion? When does love become an obsession? And what happens when the people we trust most are the ones we should fear? Before we dive into this shocking case, like this video, subscribe to our channel for more tales of love, lies, and betrayal that end in murder. Jamal Batson was the kind of man people admired. A hardworking husband, a devoted father, and a man who took pride in providing for his family. He and his wife, Shaniqua Nick Batson, had built a life together in Houston, raising their 2 young children in a home filled with love and stability. But all of that came to a violent, irreversible end on a night that should have been ordinary. It happened fast, too fast. A botched robbery in a convenience store parking lot. A gun fired in panic. A life stolen in an instant. At just 32 years old, Jamal was gone. The news sent shockwaves through the community. Friends, neighbors, and co-workers mourned him, remembering the man who always put family first. And at the center of it all was Nick, now a widow at 28, left to pick up the pieces of a shattered life. In the days after the funeral, grief swallowed the Batson family whole. But in that grief, someone stepped forward. Rashad Batson was Jamal's younger brother, charismatic, street-smart, and always walking a fine line between potential and recklessness. Unlike his older brother, who had settled into a steady life, Rashad had never quite found his way. He bounced between jobs, women, and ambitions that never fully materialized. But when Jamal died, he did something no one expected. He moved in with Nick. First, it made sense. Nick was suddenly alone with 2 kids, drowning in sorrow and responsibility. Rashad, for all his flaws, was family. He would help with the children, fix things around the house, be the male presence that Jamal no longer could. People whispered about it, of course, how strange it was for a young, single man to suddenly become a live-in father figure, but grief makes people do things they normally wouldn't. For a while, it seemed like a noble act. Rashad played the role of protector, keeping Nick company during sleepless nights, stepping in where his brother had left off. But there was something beneath the surface, something unspoken. Rashad had always admired Nick, perhaps too much. Even when Jamal was alive, he had watched her, lingered too long in her presence, memorized the way she laughed, the way she carried herself. He had never dared to act on it, had never even admitted it to himself. But now, living under the same roof, lines blurred. The grief that connected them became something else entirely. The community praised him for stepping up, but some sensed it, an energy between Rashad and Nick that didn't quite sit right. A glance that lasted too long. A touch that lingered. A closeness that felt too close. No one said anything. Not yet. It started with whispers in the dark. Soft conversations in the dead of night. When the house was quiet, the kids were asleep, and grief felt too heavy to carry alone. Rashad would sit with Nick on the couch, their voices hushed but urgent, trading memories of Jamal, of the life that was gone. He told her she was strong, that Jamal would want her to be happy, that she deserved to be happy. Then came the touches, innocent at first. A hand lingering too long on hers, a brush of fingers against her back as he passed by. A moment too close, a breath too warm. And then, one night, it happened. A kiss, soft at first, hesitant, then urgent, then unstoppable. Nick pulled away, her heart slamming in her chest. This was wrong. It was betrayal. But Rashad just looked at her, his dark eyes unreadable. "It's okay," he whispered. "We need each other." And maybe, for a moment, she believed him. The affair ignited like a fire that had been waiting for a spark. Nights turned into stolen moments in the bedroom, tangled in sheets and silence. Guilt clawed at Nick's chest every time she traced Rashad's skin. Skin that was so much like Jamal's, but wasn't. She knew it was a mistake, knew it was selfish, knew it would destroy everything if anyone found out. But she couldn't stop. Rashad didn't see it as a mistake. To him, it was fate. He told her that Jamal's death had meant something, that it had cleared the path for them, that what they had was real, that it was meant to be. And when she tried to say no, when she tried to slow down, his grip tightened, his eyes darkened. Nick wanted to keep it hidden, wanted to pretend it wasn't happening when the sun was up. Rashad wanted the opposite. He started making reckless decisions, showing up unannounced at her job, liking old photos of her and Jamal online, posting cryptic messages that made people wonder. He started watching her, studying her, waiting for any sign that she was slipping away. And then, one night, she told him it had to end. "I can't do this anymore," she said, her voice shaking. "I love Jamal, and I can't keep pretending like this is normal." Rashad's jaw tensed. His hands curled into fists. "So what? You just used me?" She shook her head. "No, You did," he hissed. "You needed me, and now you're done? Just like that?" Nick stepped back, fear creeping up her spine. The man in front of her wasn't the grieving brother who had held her at night. He was something else now, something darker, something dangerous, and she had no idea how far he would go. Nick wanted a fresh start, a life unchained from the past, from grief, from guilt. She needed to be someone other than the widow drowning in her own mistakes. That's when she met Xavier Whitaker. Xavier was everything she should have been looking for: successful, charming, stable. He had built his own business from the ground up, carried himself with quiet confidence, and made her feel like a woman again, not just a mother or a widow. With him, she could breathe. But Rashad saw him as an intruder. At first, Nick thought she could handle it. The cold stares, the offhand comments, Rashad threw her words away whenever Xavier's name came up. "So that's what you want now? Some rich-ass nigga to make you forget?" He sneered one night, his voice laced with something dangerous. "It's none of your business, Rashad." She snapped back, forcing herself not to tremble under his stare. But it didn't stop there. The calls started first. At all hours of the night, always from a blocked number. Silence on the other end, breathing just loud enough to make her skin crawl. Then came the break-ins. Nothing stolen, no signs of forced entry. Just small, eerie reminders that someone had been there. A picture of her and Xavier, shattered on the floor. A single rose left on her pillow. She knew it was Rashad, and he wanted her to know it, too. Then it escalated. Xavier woke up one morning to find his tires slashed. A note tucked under his windshield wiper. "She's not yours." Anonymous messages flooded his phone. Graphic, hateful words meant to plant doubt, to poison his mind against Nick. But the worst was the night Nick came home to find Rashad waiting in the dark. She barely had time to react before he was on her, grabbing her wrist, pulling her close. "You think you can just erase me?" he whispered, his breath hot against her ear. "Like I didn't matter? Like we didn't happen?" She tried to yank free, her heart slamming against her ribs. "Let me go, Rashad." But he didn't. Instead, he leaned in, his lips grazing her jaw in a twisted, possessive claim. "He doesn't love you like I do. He doesn't know you like I do." Her stomach churned. She had to end this. But Rashad wouldn't be ignored. It happened fast. Too fast. Nick was in the kitchen, laughing at something Xavier had just said, when the front door slammed shut behind them. The sound was so sharp, so final, that it sent a chill crawling up her spine. Then she saw him, Rashad, standing in the doorway, a gun in his hand, his chest rising and falling in ragged, angry breaths. His eyes wild, dark, unhinged, locked onto her like a predator staring down prey. Xavier tensed beside her. He didn't know everything, but he knew enough. "Yo, you need to leave, man," he said, stepping in front of Nick. Rashad laughed. A low, bitter sound. "Leave?" he echoed. "You think you can just take what's mine and tell me to leave?" Nick felt her stomach twist. "Rashad, please," she started, stepping forward, hands up like she was trying to calm a wild animal. "You don't have to do this." But Rashad wasn't listening. "You replaced him," he seethed, voice shaking with rage. "You replaced me." Xavier squared his shoulders, his hands balling into fists. "You need to put the gun down and get the fuck out of here." Rashad tilted his head, a twisted smirk creeping across his face. "You don't tell me what to do." And then he pulled the trigger. The gunshot was deafening. Nick felt the warm spray before she even registered what had happened. Xavier's body jerked, a sickening crack echoing as he collapsed onto the tile. A hole in his forehead. "Eyes still open. Lifeless." Nick's scream tore through the house, but Rashad wasn't done. He turned to her, chest heaving, realization flickering across his face. But not regret. Just possession. Just twisted love. "Help me," he said. She choked on a sob, backing away from Xavier's body. "What? Help me get rid of him." His voice was eerily calm now, steady. Like this was just another problem to fix. No, I can't." His expression darkened. "You don't have a choice." He grabbed her, fingers digging into her arms, dragging her toward Xavier's corpse. Nick thrashed, her breath coming in panicked gasps. Then she ran. She darted toward the door, heart pounding, praying she could make it outside before he caught her. But Rashad was faster. His hands snatched her back, fingers wrapping around her throat like a vice. "You think you can run from me?" he growled. She clawed at his grip, her vision going spotty, her lungs burning. Rashad's face blurred, but she could still hear him. "I loved you," he whispered. "I did this for us." Her body went limp. Rashad's breath came in ragged gulps as he stared down at what he had done. Nick lay still, her eyes wide but empty. His hands trembled. "This wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't supposed to happen," he repeated. The house was silent when the police arrived, too silent. Officers moved cautiously through the blood-stained living room, the air thick with the metallic scent of death. And there he was, Rashad Batson, standing in the middle of it all, covered in blood, his hands trembling. He wasn't trying to run. He wasn't even trying to hide. He was just pacing, back and forth, mumbling under his breath, eyes vacant. It was over. The moment the cuffs clicked around his wrists, Rashad didn't resist. He just stared down at his hands, as if only now realizing what he had done. By sunrise, the entire city of Houston was talking about it. A widow, her dead husband's brother, and a love triangle that ended in bloodshed. The media ran with it. News stations dissected every detail, the forbidden affair, the jealousy, the obsession that spiraled into murder. Social media erupted. Some blamed Nick, calling her reckless, accusing her of playing with fire. Others condemned Rashad, painting him as a monster who had stalked and terrorized her. But everyone wanted to know the same thing. How did no one see this coming? And then the past came crawling back. Old posts resurfaced, cryptic captions on Nick's Instagram, photos of her and Rashad standing too close, the comments laced with something just beneath the surface. Tweets from Rashad, vague and bitter, ranting about betrayal. The signs had been there. No one had put them together until it was too late. Then came the voices, friends, family, people who had known Rashad and Nick before it all unraveled. She was scared. One of Nick's closest friends told reporters, her voice shaking. She told me she felt trapped, that he wouldn't leave her alone. But she didn't want to make it worse. He always had a thing for her, an old friend of Jamal's revealed. Even when Jamal was alive, we all saw it. But no one saw the worst part. Nick's children. The moment her mother walked through the door, their faces crumpled. They didn't understand, not fully, but they knew. "Where's Mommy?" the youngest asked, his small voice breaking. Their grandmother's heart shattered. How do you tell a child their mother isn't coming home? That their uncle, the man who had tucked them in at night, the man they had trusted, had taken her away forever? They screamed for her. They sobbed. And there was nothing anyone could do to fix it. Nothing could bring their mother back. And as Rashad sat alone in a jail cell, staring at the blood on his hands, one truth became impossible to ignore. He hadn't just killed Nick and Xavier. He had destroyed everything. The courtroom was packed. Cameras lined the back wall. Reporters scribbled furiously. And the entire city watched as Rashad Batson sat motionless at the defense table, his face unreadable. His lawyers had crafted their defense carefully, not guilty by reason of insanity. They argued that Rashad had been consumed by grief, that he'd acted in a dissociative state, unable to comprehend his own actions. The prosecution tore that apart. They painted Rashad as a man who knew exactly what he was doing. A man who stalked, threatened, and ultimately executed 2 people out of jealousy. They played recordings of his menacing voicemails, showed texts where he had warned Nick that she would never belong to anyone else. The jury didn't waver. They saw through the insanity plea. They saw the premeditation, the control, the obsession that turned to murder. Rashad Batson wasn't a man who had snapped. He was a killer who had made a choice. When the verdict was read, there was no gasp, no outcry, just silence. Guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. The sentence followed swiftly, death by hanging. Rashad sat still, showing no emotion, as if he had already accepted his fate. But the world outside the courtroom wasn't silent. The case ignited debate. Some blamed Nick, whispering that she had played with fire by ever getting involved with Rashad in the first place. Others saw her as a victim, a woman trapped in a toxic, dangerous situation that had spiraled out of control. Experts weighed in on national TV. This case highlights the dark side of grief and obsession. One psychologist explained. The red flags were there, but we often don't see them until it's too late. And for Nick's family, for her children, for those who had loved her, it was too late. They sat in the front row during sentencing, her mother clutching a photo of Nick smiling. Her children too young to fully understand that their mother was never coming back. Justice had been served, but the scars would never heal. Rashad's mother, Gloria Batson, sat in the courtroom, frozen in grief. She had already buried 1 son. Now she was about to lose another. As the judge read the verdict, her hands trembled in her lap. Guilty. Death. The words echoed in her head, but she couldn't fully process them. How had it come to this? She had lost Jamal to violence, a senseless killing in the streets. And now, Rashad had become the very thing that had taken his brother away. A murderer. A man with blood on his hands. Tears blurred her vision as she looked at him, sitting stiff and emotionless. Did he feel anything? Did he regret it? The world saw him as a monster, but she saw her baby boy, the child she had rocked to sleep, the little boy who used to cling to her when he was afraid of the dark. Now he was the darkness. People whispered about Nick's children, about how they had lost both their parents in one night. But no one thought about her loss. She had lost both of her sons. One to death, and one to the needle. Gloria's heart was shattered beyond repair. The story of Shaniqua, Nick Batson, and Rashad Batson is one of love turned deadly, grief turned toxic, and passion turned into violence. It started with loss. Jamal's death should have brought the family together in mourning. Instead, it set off a chain of events that ended in bloodshed. What began as a moment of comfort between 2 grieving souls spiraled into something far more dangerous. Nick, torn between guilt and desire, found herself trapped in a love that was never meant to be. Rashad, consumed by obsession, saw her as his to keep, his last connection to the brother he had lost. But love mixed with possession is not love at all. It is a slow, unraveling madness. By the time Nick realized the depth of Rashad's control, it was too late. Xavier Whitaker became collateral damage in a game he didn't even know he was playing. And when Rashad looked down at Nick's lifeless body, the woman he claimed to love more than anything, he realized too late that he had destroyed everything. The justice system was swift. A trial, a verdict, a death sentence. But justice does not bring back the dead. It does not erase the pain of 2 motherless children, a grieving family, a mother who lost both of her sons in different ways. The world debated the case. Was Rashad always dangerous? Or did grief twist him into something unrecognizable? Was Nick truly a victim? Or did she make a fatal mistake in trusting the wrong man? Could this tragedy have been prevented if someone had seen the warning signs earlier? In the end, There are no simple answers. Only a tragic love story with an ending written in blood. If this story shocked you, like and subscribe to our channel for more cases that explore the darkest intersections of love, lies, and betrayal.